Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Karina. On this Monday late night session of the Matura Express, we're going to talk about past tenses. Okay. As I already mentioned, tonight's topic is past tenses. So we're going to talk about the past simple, the past progressive, and the past perfect all in one go. In an ideal world, there would be a course outline on my sheet, which it obviously isn't. I obviously only saved the old version, so I'm going to talk you through the whole thing. I'm going to show you how the three tenses are formed, how they are used, what the differences are, if there are any exceptions. I will also talk about the past perfect a little more in detail, as I think that that's one of the tenses that people tend to forget, especially in oral exams. I have heard a good many oral exams in my life, and people hardly ever use the past perfect tense, so if I can, I'd like to change that. Then there will also be some example sentences on how to use the three tenses. It's a classic gap fill. I will then give you a couple of seconds to think about them and solve the tense problems, if there are any. I think that past tenses are a pretty straightforward topic, really. I think they're quite easy compared to other tenses, especially compared to present perfect and present perfect progressive tense and stuff like that. So I think that the whole thing, or I'll try to be as brief and concise as necessary. Past simple first. Past simple is what we in German call the Mitvergangenheit, or what in school books is very frequently referred to as the Erzählzeit in German, which I think is a quite good nickname for the tense, as that's what we use it for. We narrate stories that happened in the past. What is important about the past simple is that it lets the course of action progress. So you kind of give an enumeration, you talk people through the whole story that you want to tell them. So as soon as you kind of introduce a new past tense form, the whole story advances, the whole story progresses. Useful for the A-levels, first of all, in your tasks for your personal biography, everything or most of what happened in your lives would be past tense, so your whole school career and stuff like that would be past simple. So I attended the whatever grammar school in wherever, I don't know. So a lot of things that you narrate about yourself, everything that was prior to your Matura courses, or most of it would be past simple. As I said, most important thing is it lets the story advance, which is the characteristic of the past simple tense. The formation is pretty easy as well, but there's one thing that I noticed that sometimes goes wrong. That is the thing that is highlighted in green in my PDF file. You formed with the second form of the irregular or regular verbs, depending on what it is. She won a gold medal in the 1992 Olympics. They are over for a while now. So she won a gold medal. That's history. That's a story. You are narrating what you can remember of the 1992 Olympics, talking about someone who competed in those Olympic Games. Careful about the negation. She did not or didn't win. Highlighted in green simply for the fact that people in oral exams very frequently tend to use a double past tense. So you would get something like she didn't won, because we tend to adopt the form of the positive sentence, especially when you have to do some this kind of grammar drill kind of thing. So when you have a positive sentence, an affirmative sentence, and you have to negate the sentence, people very often adopt the past tense form. So we would get constellations like she didn't won, which is a double past tense, which is not good. We have the did, which is an auxiliary. We don't really translate it, but we need it for the formation, and that's the only thing that is in the past tense. We use the verb, the main verb of the sentence in its base form. The same holds true for the questions, did you win a gold medal in the 1992 Olympics? We don't know, and we are inquiring about history. So the only thing, be careful about the base form in negations and questions. I'm so glad that Dominique pointed it out that I can draw on the thing. That's so good. We use it for things that happened in the past and that are considered as being over. They have no immediate results, outcome, or a consequence visible. That is important as a kind of like a feature that distinguishes the past simple from the present perfect, which will be or will probably be the content of a separate stream. Present perfect tense is slightly more difficult, or so I think. We do not have an immediate consequence, so there is no immediate consequence of her winning a gold medal in the 1992 Olympics. That's history. We only talk about it a good many years later. So we don't have any visible results that we could present. In the present perfect, you have standard sentences like, have you done your homework? Because then you want to see the actual homework. That would be the consequence visible, or that would be the result or the outcome that we don't necessarily have in the past simple. It is the tense that we use for storytelling, erzählzeit. That's what I mentioned in the beginning. It advances your story, so as soon as you tell a story about your last holidays, about your whatever you did in the 10 days that you spent in Croatia, whatever, you would narrate the whole thing in the past simple as long as you want your story to go on. As soon as you describe circumstances, that's a different story, but we're gonna talk about that in a second. So it makes it advance, as in we landed in, I don't know, Cairo on Wednesday. We moved into our hotel and we thought it was great, and we spent, I don't know, the first night by the beach, whatever. So that would be a sequence of events. That would be storytelling kind of thing. Completed short actions in the past that happened one after the other. So Susan got up from her chair and left. Oops. Well, that's two short actions. One has to be completed in order to be able to start the other. You can't get up and leave at the same time, really. So it's two short actions that kind of, ties up with what I mentioned in point B. It makes the story progress. First she got up. As soon as that was done, she left the room. And it's two short actions. That's kind of important. Good. I think that was it for past simple tenses. So the most important thing is probably that it is a storytelling kind of thing, and that it progresses the story. Past progressive, very easy, as most of the progressive forms are. Formation done with was, were, and verb plus ing. They were dancing to the songs in my incredibly creative example sentence. The negation and the questions are quite easy. You don't really have to pay any attention to anything. There's no fake auxiliaries that you don't translate or they don't have in German. They were not dancing, or they weren't dancing. In oral English, you would probably use the contractions. Question is, were they dancing to the songs? So here you only invert the sentence structure, basically. First form and third form use the was, but you know that, of course, all the plural forms use the were. Those of you who watched my stream on present tenses, did I ever do that? Yes. Will, the examples are kind of similar, so is the usage. You emphasize the duration of an event. That's what most progressive forms do. They emphasize that something took or was taken a little longer. You can only use it with action verbs, but that is kind of, self-explanatory really, because action verbs, like the stuff that you actually do, that's the only thing that you can kind of extend over a considerably longer period of time. So you can't use it with state verbs, and you can't use it with verbs that express emotions, or if you do, then you sometimes express something slightly different. In my present tense stream, I had the example of I am loving it, the kind of fake wrong McDonald's slogan. The same holds true for the past progressive. You cannot really use them with emotions. And if you do, you might imply something slightly different, so I'd be careful if I were you. So you only use it with action verbs, stuff that you do, because you can like make an action, a longer action out of that. Two longer actions happening at the same time. Now we are moving very much in textbook, school books realms, really. I was watching television while Peter was doing the dishes, so that's two longer actions. They take a while. They occur simultaneously, so you have two longer actions going parallel actions kind of thing. It happens at the same time. You were watching television and Peter, good old Peter, was doing the dishes at the same time while you were watching television and relaxing. So it's two longer actions, both of them in the past progressive. And you have a longer action, which would be past progressive, which is interrupted by a shorter one. And I don't know why there is no example sentence, so I have to make up one. I'm pretty sure it's going to be incredible. I don't know. I was having a shower when the phone rang. So the shower is like the longer action and it is interrupted by your phone ringing. You either have to interrupt the shower as well or you don't, but in any case, the ringing sort of interrupts the longer thing. So I was having a shower when the phone rang, when the doorbell rang. I was having a shower when mom shouted that dinner was ready, whatever. Something like that. I think you get the point. My examples are always so incredibly creative. There are verbs that per meaning that they have to themselves that can't be a long action because it's just not possible to come in, for example. You cannot extend coming into the door like for a longer period of time. That means that you can't really make it in ing form. It just sounds a bit weird. If you use it, that's mistakes that would definitely not hinder your conversation with anyone, but it sounds a bit weird if you say stuff like I was leaving the room or I was coming in. You hear that sometimes or you read that sometimes, but if you do, then it is a stylistic device and comes out of like literary language. Songs do that every now and then because especially the leaving someone can be a longer process, I guess. If you use it wisely. If you use it, it is usually a rhetoric device that you should use carefully. So I was coming in, standard example. You can't really extend it that much. We were arriving at the station to arrive uncommon. That's usually a punctual, like that's one point in history and can't be a long action, really. Why does it say revision tense is here and then there's nothing? That's weird. That's really weird. Anyway, that's not what the layout was supposed to look like. No, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. I'll show you. Let's see if my Word file is better than my PDF. Yes, it is. Fantastic. That's a compare and contrast kind of thing. So it should illustrate what the difference between past simple and past progressive is, apart from what I already explained. So I walked home after the party last night is a piece of information for your listener, like the story that you want to come away. Well, the discussion was, did you walk home? Did you take the taxi home? Did someone give you a lift home? And the piece of information is, well, I walked home after the party last night. All the way home, completed action, nothing happening on your way home. Just a piece of information that you, first of all, walked home and that you got home eventually. I was walking home after the party last night is then highly likely followed by some kind of subordinate clause, something interrupting the action, the walking home, because you emphasized that it was a longer period of time. That was interrupted by something else, by the actual event. So in this sentence, the when I met Dan would be the most important piece of information. That's what you want to say, because it is, well, it was a highly unlikely encounter in the middle of the night on your way home. You normally don't meet him there, but then you were walking home last night and then you met him. So the subordinate clause, why can I draw on the PDF, but why can I not draw on a Word file? That's weird. Anyway, so when I'm at Dan is the actual piece of information, and it interrupts the you walking home, which is not that relevant, but it kind of sets the frame for the main action. So it's kind of the background information that you give your listener. But as I said, the story that you want to talk about is the encounter with Dan. You would then probably continue the story and tell your audience what you did and what you were talking about afterwards. Then we have one of my favorite tenses that nobody uses ever. The past perfect tense, in German, the Vorvergangenheit, which I think is a name that in German makes quite a lot of sense, because it does express what the past perfect does. The formation is quite easy, had and the past participle unchangeable, so you don't have to be careful about any changes, about any third person S's or anything. It's always had and the past participle, so the third form of the verb. I don't know. We had done all the housework, or we had not done all the housework, doesn't really very frequently occur in its question form, because that is just a usage that you don't have that much, using a past perfect in a question. But then it would be something like had we done, but then for the combination with the past simple and it being the subordinate clause in most of the cases, you would not use it that much. The situation, when to use it. You want to tell a story, that's usually like kind of the background, that's usually kind of the setup. You want to tell a story in the past simple, interspersed with some like past progressive tenses maybe. So the actual story, the most important thing, the core of your story is narrated in the past simple. For some reason you decide that what happened beforehand, so earlier, so further back in time basically, is relevant to your story, and then you decide to add it in a subordinate clause that uses the past perfect. So here's my example sentence, or some of my example sentences, all very creative as well. In the first sentence you have two time frames. So one thing happens at 8 o'clock and the other thing happens at 7 o'clock, just for you to illustrate what I mean by time frame and stuff like that. So we arrived at the party at 7 o'clock, so that's the past simple thing. So that's like the story. We want to tell our audience what happened at the party. And what happened prior to that was that Lucy, who we actually wanted to meet, had already left at 7 o'clock. So the action is completed, Lucy's gone, and we arrived at the party without being able to talk to her. So when we arrived at the party, Lucy had already left. So that was earlier in time. Lucy left at 7 and we arrived at the party at 8. When I got to the cinema, the film had already started. We got to the cinema 10 minutes late, so the movie had started 10 minutes ago. So we basically came into like the cinema room and all the ads were already done, like kind of thing. When I got home last night, it was very quiet. Everyone had gone to bed. So you got home from a party, you got home from, I don't know, work, but everyone had already gone to bed, so there was no one to talk to. So you got home at around 10, but they all got to bed at 9, let's say. So, action completed, both of them. Early on the timeline, somehow relevant to the overall action. You normally have Signalwörter like before and after in the two sentences because you want to show that there's a correlation between the two tenses, kind of thing. So be careful when there's a before and an after in, or an after, it's hardly ever both, in one of your example sentences that you have to do in preparation for the A-levels. So that's basically what I have to say about past perfect tenses. Try to use them. You get extra points in your A-levels for using some, well, not abstract grammar, but some more complex grammar. So, like, kind of try to include past perfect tense every now and then would be a quite good idea. I'll show you a couple of sentences that I thought might illustrate the point. There's actually quite a lot of example sentences, but I will only pick some that kind of fit my explanations. B, for example, if you have a look at sentence B, contrary to what we get taught at university, I'm a big fan of gap fills, so I think that they are great. You might not be of my opinion, but... So we have a sentence that is introduced by while, which is kind of a signalwort for past progressive in a lot of cases. So while the kids were studying, in this case, the mother was trying to get the housework done. Both are like two longer actions that kind of run simultaneously. So the kids are studying, mom is trying to get the housework done, two longer actions, so past progressive in both cases. We're studying and trying to get the housework done. Be careful about the spelling, so both the study and the try retain their Y. In the end, you only add an ing. Sometimes people do weird things with the spelling of ing forms. E, a classic example of the longer action interrupted by a shorter one. We were walking along the street, which is the less important part of the story. We were walking along the street when suddenly we heard footsteps behind us. That is the most important thing. The walking along the street only sets the frame, like that's the background, that's the action. You want your listeners to know that there was a street and it was dark and it was lonely, and then you suddenly heard footsteps behind yourselves. So we heard footsteps while we were walking along the street. Somebody was following us. To add some more drama to the whole thing, I would have an ing form here as well. Somebody was following us because we want some, you want to emphasize that there's a longer action here as well. So we were walking, heard was following. Be careful about the spelling of the heard as well. People tend to add an E that should not go there. I would write it down for you if my Word file allowed me to do it. So before I mess up everything, I just don't. So be careful about the heard in any case. Don't add an E where there should be no E. Here, heard is the forms. In the third sentence, in the second part of the sentence, somebody was following, I would add an ing form for the drama, You want to emphasize that there was somebody behind you all the way along. One of the classic examples of a past tense, what you have to think of a past perfect, what you have to think about is which of the actions was prior to the other. So there's something like Zeitenfolge, so you have to figure out what happened earlier. So what is like long way back in time. The whole story is she went out with a friend. That's the story. But then she wants her listeners to know that she was only allowed to go out after she had completed the homework, because that's what mom said. Complete your homework first and then you're allowed to go out. So the sentence would be after she had completed her homework, she went out with a friend last Saturday. So in the after, like when you have an after, which is usually the Nebensatz, you have the past perfect. After she had completed, she went out with her friend. She went out with her friends would be the most important part of the story. And you would then probably continue with like a narration of what happened at the party or wherever she went. Next one is not that interesting. Oh yeah. That one maybe. The car, blah, 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 to make strange noises while the family, blah, 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 on the motorway. Very often, like usually when I give you sentences, I try them out first, and most of my students would very likely say something like was beginning, which doesn't really make sense because to begin something is like a point that it's one point in history, so you can't begin something over a longer period of time unless, as I said, you mean it as some kind of stylistic device. But well, maybe your oral A-levels are not the place for experiments with rhetoric devices. The car began to make strange noises while the family was driving on the motorway. So the was driving was longer action. They started to drive at 9 o'clock, and at 9:30 the car suddenly began to make strange noises. So that interrupts the driving. So we have a longer period of time, a longer action interrupted by a shorter one. That sets in like suddenly. And the last one, that's a terrible sentence. I can't do that. That's really bad. Anyway, let's do the last one. How do I come up with example sentences like that? Like K is a terrible sentence to do, like okay, I spare you K. Awesome. that's terrible, like it really is. I must have had a really happy day when I did those example sentences. So Mr. Peters is a writer and he publishes novels. That's what writers do. So the publication was prior to the selling, because you have to have something published before you can actually sell. So after Mr. Peters' first novel had been published, he sold a good 2 million copies of it. So, well, it's not that many actually. So he wasn't really successful, but in any case, he published it, and they also sold, even though they didn't sell very well. Same thing as in the sentence before. After Mr. Peters had published it, that was first, he published it on the 29th of June, for example. And by the 15th of August, it's already sold 2 million copies. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. All the other example sentences are either not very illustrative or the same as we have already seen. Very quickly, a very, very, very super quick recap of what I said. Past simple for storytelling, important, also important, do not include a double past tense. So she did, that's past tense enough. And base form of the verb to follow, that's the main verb. Past progressive for longer actions or too long simultaneous actions, or for emphasizing that something did take a considerable amount of time. If I very proudly say that I was studying for 5 hours yesterday, I want my audience to be proud of myself, or proud of me, because 5 hours is a lot. Well, for me it is at least. I was studying for 5 hours is kind of like, great, Karina, done a good job. You must see how you know everything now. Don't use them with emotions, or if you do, be careful. Only use them with action verbs. So verbs like, I don't know, walk, run, horse ride, climb, whatever. Stuff that you do for a considerably longer period of time. Be careful about ing forms in verbs that can't be a longer period of time. Arrive, leave, stuff like that. You can't leave the room for 5 hours. You leave it quickly, normally. Past perfect, as I said, use it, try to use it. Write down in your preparation time, you have half an hour, so you can also prepare some good grammar. Write down a sentence, or like parts of a sentence. You're not allowed full sentences. Write down a sentence that includes a past tense, gives you extra points in the grammar section. Yep, I think that's it. I hope I could give you some information on past tenses. As I said, very straightforward, or at least I think so. Prepare some good sentences in your preparation time, and we see each other again next Monday. Thank you very much, and good night.
Ja, das klart.